Hello, welcome once again to Geography class. And today we are going to be learning statistical mapping and presentation of statistics in total. Here we have the objectives that include the background of statistics, also method of data presentation. We're talking about statistics. First and foremost, statistics is concerned with scientific method for collecting, organizing, summarizing, analyzing, and presenting data in a way that we can draw valid conclusion and make reasonable decisions from all the statistics data that we've gathered. It is very relevant in geography because geography works with data collection and analysis to present and draw conclusion. Here we organize data and as well analyze data. Geography represents data that have been analyzed, and from it we can draw relevant conclusions as a result of all the thorough statistical process data has gone through. Method of data presentation may include line graph, which is simply like a curve that connects points that are plotted on a graph sheet. It is mostly used in depicting information that varies from place to place, time to time, year to year, temperature, import and export, and this makes it simple in graphic understanding of depicted statistics gathered over the years in geography. Now, the other method, we have compound line graph. When we talk about compound line graph, it is used to show multiple variables on a graph, and it becomes compound when it's more than one line on the curve. For example, when you are depicting variables that are similar but are more than one, you can a compound line graph is used. Like we have here, exportation of cocoa, cassava, and beans. Next is simple bar graph. It is a means of using bars to represent data in form of proportion, and this can be used in collecting different data representing different variables on the same graph. The next is a group bar graph. It accommodates so many variables in the same group. That is why it is a group bar graph, and it is also used commonly in representing data. Next is a divided bar graph representing two variables on the same bar. It is a combination of simple bars in representing variables. Talking about divergent bar graph shows the increase and decrease when comparing standard of a certain variable. Climate in rainfall, you can have crops, production and circulation. This is what it means. The next is the rainfall and temperature graph. This combines both variables for rainfall and temperature. Unfortunately, most people think that different stations should represent different variables on different graphs, but no, it is not the way they think. Temperature and rainfall variables should be represented on the same bar graph. Thereby, we have the rainfall and temperature graph, thereby comparing variables in different locations. Like we have here the combination of the rainfall and temperature variables. Now we move on to choropleth map. When talking about a choropleth map, it is otherwise referred to as a density map, and it is concerned with the distribution of quantity in relation to an area. Quantity may in terms be material or human. When talking about this, it is drawn to illustrate almost anything for which a percentage ratio or average figure is obtainable for component unit on the map. Mostly in geography, it is used in measuring the population density of people in a particular area or region. Yes, we are going to be talking about pie graph now. Pie graph shows the relationship of parts to the whole in order to facilitate the comparison of the area of segments. As we all know pie graph to be in a cyclical form, showing different segments having different form of variable it represents in percentage and also in degrees. It is plotted so as to get the needed statistics for different form of variable as a segment of a whole. Unlike the pie graph, one has to deal with more than two circles in constructing a proportional circle. Therefore, to use this method in obtaining a good representation of data, one has to use the radii of a circle to measure, like the case of a proportional pie graph, the amount of the information being represented on a particular location on a map, and the variable has its representative radii on the map, and it varies from one location to another as the data varies from location to location on the map. For example, as you can see, the circle varies from one place to another, depicting the data reflected. A dot map is used in showing quantity over a map. As you can see, a dot represents or portrays a constant value all over the map. For example, a dot represents 1000 units of a variable, and this can be used in presenting data in the different locations on a map. Yes, the next one we're looking at is a flow graph. A flow graph is designed to depict movement of persons, goods along a route, or a traffic density along a route, a road, a rail, and also a waterway. It shows the route, the amount of volume, and also the frequency of movement of goods and persons. In conclusion, when statistical data are being represented with visual elements that can easily be understood and interpreted, it is easier to understand and give conclusions to data that are being analyzed in variables. Well, on that surveying, I'm going to hand over to my teacher here.
Welcome to the Ministry of Education Kaduna State Radio and Television e-learning program. Welcome to the geography class. Introduction to elementary land survey. Today we'll be looking at a branch of land survey, which is chain surveying. During the course of our studies today, we'll be looking at an introduction, which is a brief outline of what we did in our last class. We'll look at the definition of chain survey. We'll look at chain surveying instruments and their functions. We'll also look at advantages of chain surveying as well as the disadvantages of chain surveying. Now let's go to the introduction. During our last class, we had defined some terms which includes land surveying and land surveying. We also looked at the importance of land surveying, and then we looked at the branches of land surveying, which includes the topographical survey, the engineering survey, the geographical survey, among others. And then finally, we're able to look at types of land surveying. Today, we'll start by reminding ourselves of the definition of land surveying. What is land surveying? Land survey is a process by which measurement of land is made and then represent such measurements by tables, plans, or layouts for specific purposes. During our last class, we were able to show us a picture of a plan and layout and also a table when we were talking about land surveying. Next, we'll be looking at the types of land surveying. During our last class, I said we had 6 types. We'll take them one after the other. We have 1, chain surveying, 2, traverse surveying, 3, aerial surveying, 4, triangulation surveying, 5, plane table surveying, and 6, hydrographic surveying. During this lesson, our concentration is going to be on chain surveying. What is chain survey? Chain survey refers to the direct linear measurement of an area. It is the branch of surveying in which only linear measurements are made in the field. When we say linear measurements, we're talking about measurements that are taken in straight lines. That is why we say linear from the word line. It involves the use of distance measurements only, but it forms the foundation on which advanced surveying methods are based. When we're talking about surveying, we mentioned 6 other types. So the first form of surveying is the chain surveying. All other forms of surveying are derived from chain surveying. It involves the use of simple procedures and instruments. It is the simplest and oldest form of surveying. Now, let's look at some of the chain surveying instruments that we have. We have 1, the ranging pole, 2, the measuring tape, 3, the offset staff, 4, the station peg, 5, the optical square, 6, the Gunter's chain, 7, the arrows or pins, 8, the steel band, 9, the Watkins clinometer, and 10, the field book. Now, depending on what books you're using, there might be more instruments, but these are the basic ones. We'll explain a number of them. We'll explain them by looking at their functions and the description. That is what they look like. But before we do that, we have a picture or a diagram of some of the surveying instruments that have been mentioned. We have the Gunter's chain, we have the pins, we have the pegs, or what I call the station pegs. We also have the ranging poles, or like some other people will call it, the ranging rods. And then we have the plumb bob. These are just a few of the instruments that we have. Now, let's look at their description and their functions. Number 1, we have the ranging pole. What is a ranging pole? It is made of light metals or seasoned wood, and it is between 1.8 meters to 3 meters in length. Now, when we say light metals, we mean metals that are not heavy, because these equipments need to be carried out into the area where surveying work would be done. It is not the only equipment. If they're so heavy, it would be very hard for the surveyor to carry them out. They are of 2 types, either made of light metal or seasoned wood. That is wood that has been treated so that it will not rot or get damaged easily. It is painted in alternate bright colors, such as white, red, and black, to make it visible from afar. It has an iron shoe at one end to allow it to be fixed into the ground. When we go further, I'll show us a diagram and I'll explain what we mean by iron shoe and then talking about the bright colors. However, let's look at the functions of the ranging pole. We have 2 main functions. 1, it is used for marking stations. 2, it is also used for marking straight lines. Remember, we said chain surveying are linear measurements and they are measurements of distance. When we say stations, we're referring to points. We'll talk about stations as we continue with our lesson. Now, this is a diagram of a ranging pole. You can see it's, we say 1.8 to 3 meters long, and then it has alternating, this particular one has an alternating white and yellow, deep yellow color. Those that are white, red, and black. Like we said, it is so that whoever is standing or viewing the pole will be able to make accurate measurements. You'll be able to see it from wherever you are. We'll look at the second instrument, which is what we call the arrows or pins. They are painted steel wires or pointed markers. They are about 381 millimeters or 15 inches long. It is bent at the top into a ring, and a red piece of cloth can be tied to make them easier to see. It is also painted in bright colors to be seen easily. Now, you notice chain surveying instruments say they must be seen easily because you're out in the sun taking measurements from one distance to another. And surveying practices are not carried out by one person. You either have 2 or 3 people at the minimum so that you'll be able to communicate. And these instruments are able to communicate certain languages to individuals. They need to be visible. They need to be visible to be able to be effective in taking such measurements. What are the functions of these pins or arrows? 1, it is used during chaining for marking off chain length as measured. When we say chain length, we're referring to the Gunter's chain. We'll see that as we move along. So these pins or arrows are used to mark the length of a chain. The second thing is it is also used for marking stations. This is the second time we're mentioning stations. We'll talk about it as we go further. At number 3, which is what we call the offset staff. If you look at the diagram we have 2 staffs here. We call one the ranging rod or the ranging pole, which we had talked about earlier, and the one beside it is the offset rod. The offset rod has a narrow slit somewhere in the middle. That is the main difference between the offset rod and the ranging pole. Now, what do we have on the offset rod or the offset staff? We said this is a graduated rod, 3 meters in length. A hook may be fitted at the top for the purpose of pulling a chain through a hedge. The slits that is in between is so that you can pull a chain through it. Each telescopic link is 0.3 meters or 30 centimeters in length. That is from one offset rod to the next. It's usually a distance of 30 centimeters. What is the offset rod used for? It is used for taking short offset measurements. What do we mean by offset measurement? We said we take chain survey is for taking measurements, that is length and breadth. During the course of taking a measurement, there might be physical features that are there that you want to measure their distance from the chain measurement. Now, that physical feature you're measuring is what we call the offset. That is why you need the offset staff. Number 4, we have the Gunter's chain. Now, when you keep on saying chain, we're referring to the Gunter's chain. What is this Gunter's chain? It consists of a series of dumbbell-shaped links of steel wires joined together by 3 small rings. The chain has 100 links, and it can be 66 feet or 100 feet long, or 20 meters or 30 meters in length. So if you're taking your measurements in feet, it is either a 66 feet Gunter's chain or a 100 feet Gunter's chain, or if your measurements are in meters, you have a 20 meters or 30 meters Gunter's chain. At every meter of the chain, there is a brass tag or tally to aid reading. When we say tag, you know, when you buy a new dress, there's normally a paper showing you the size of the dress. That is a tag. This chain also has such tag at every meter reading. Since it is a chain, you might not be sure of what you're doing. The tag is to help you to be able to understand very quickly the measurements that you are taking. Every 5 meters or 10 meters of the chain also carries a different tag for identification. When you use the measuring tape, it's the same thing. You have your measurements in centimeters and in inches on different sides so that you're able to identify what you're using. It's the same thing for the Gunter's chain. What is the Gunter's chain used for? It is used in taking short or detailed measurements of length and breadth. Now, this is a diagram of a Gunter's chain. You can see it. It looks like, for those of you that have seen a double bunk bed in boarding schools, it looks like the chain on a double bunk bed, and they're linked severally. Now, when you're using the Gunter's chain to take measurement, it has a handle on both the beginning and the ending part. The measurement starts from the handle. So when you're placing them on the ground for measurement, you start from the handle. Next, we have what we call the station pegs. Station pegs. Some people call it surveyor's pegs. They are usually made of wood, and they are usually 50 millimeters by 50 millimeters in length. You can see them. They're just pieces of wood with a particular length and pointed ends. This pointed ends is to enable it to be planted into the ground, and it can be so that you'll be able to stand firmly. What are their use? They are used to mark stations. When we say stations, I've been mentioning stations. What are these stations? We have residential boundaries, points, and positions of a site. Another example of a station is when you see construction work going on. For example, the construction of gutters or culverts, they take measurements of the length or the width of such gutters, and they have this wood that they place on one side and the other to give them an accurate measurement of the area that they're going to build this gutter on. That is what the station peg is all about. And then finally, number 6, we'll be looking at what we call the field book. If you remember, in our last lesson, that was during Introduction to Elementary Land Survey, we said measurements are taken on the field and then they're transferred into plans, tables, and layouts. Now, what we use to transfer them into is what we call a field book. And this field book is about 100 millimeters by 200 millimeters in size. Depending on the field book you have, we said it opens lengthwise and the pages have a special ruling. It's not just any type of exercise book that you have. If you look at what we have on the board, we have a surveyor's field book, and this is an example of what it looks like on the inside. On my extreme right, you have the tables with the various measurements depending on what you are surveying. And on the right side, there are notes on the top and then diagrams of the area that has construction, the planned construction on it. So it gives you a detail of what is of your feasibility study, not just your feasibility study, and your measurements based on what you plan to do and the nature of the land involved. The function says it is used for recording measurements during surveying, like I've told you earlier. Now, this is what chain surveying entails. There are other instruments, but I would want you to do some work on them on your own. We'll continue by looking at the advantages of chain surveying. Once you understand your instruments, that's the chain, the field book, the Gunter's chain, the measuring tapes, the ranging pole, all other instruments that are involved at your disposal, the first thing that happens, or the first advantage you get, is that chain surveying is simple. It is a linear measurement, so it's very straightforward. It is simple. Number 2, it does not require costly equipment. It does not require costly equipment. These equipments are readily available in the departments or laboratories when you need them. Number 3, it is suitable for a fairly leveled ground. It is suitable for a fairly level ground since it is used mostly in a residential area or areas that are habited, and normally we know human beings like to settle on a fairly level ground. So the advantage of sun survey is that it is suitable for a fairly level ground. Number 4, it is used for preparing plans of smaller area without abstractions or obstacles. You can't use them for a very large area. For example, you want to build a higher institution, a very large higher institution like the big universities that we have around, the big colleges, the School of Health Technologies that we have around that are very big, you probably will not be able to use chain survey. But when you're planning a residential area, a small residential area, let's say you're planning to build your house, you can use chain survey. Now, what are the disadvantages of chain survey? We said it cannot be used for surveying large area of land. Of course, the advantage being that it is used for a small area of land. The disadvantage is that you cannot be able to use it for a large area of land. Number two, it is not always accurate because of broken lines during survey caused by the nature of the land, which makes survey slow and difficult. We know that not all land areas are leveled or fairly leveled. We have people building on steep hills, on rocky terrains. Now, because of such terrains, you're not able to adequately use chain survey because your measurements will not be accurate. So we've looked at the advantages and disadvantages of chain survey. I'll summarize the lesson before we finish. That is for the purpose of emphasis, and these are topics that might come out in your exam, so please pay careful attention. We said during the course of our lesson, we defined land surveying, and then we talked about the types of land surveying, which includes chain surveying, traverse surveying, among others, aerial surveying, triangulation surveying, plane table surveying, and hydrographic surveying. And our concentration was based on chain surveying, where we said it is based on linear measurements, where we measure length and breadth. And we said we had several instruments that we used for our measurements, which includes the ranging pole, the measuring tape, the offset staff, the station peg, the optical square, the Gunter's chain, arrows or pins, steel band, Watkins clinometer, and finally the field book. We now went further to describe these instruments as well as their functions. We also showed you a diagram of what they looked like. We talked about the ranging pole, we talked about its length being 1.8 to 3 meters, and we talked about the colors. We said it has bright colors, which can be white, black, or red. And the purpose these colors are there is because so that you'll be able to see them from a distance. The surveyor carrying out these measurements will be able to see them from a distance. The same thing with the pins. So that you'll be able to see them from a distance, they have bright colors, red and white. In fact, for the pins, you can also have a red cloth on it to make it more visible. We also talked about the advantages of chain surveying. We said that it is good for use in a relatively level land. We also said that it is a simple form of taking measurements. It is the simplest form. Chain surveying is actually the oldest form of surveying. We now went on to the disadvantages of chain surveying, where we said that it cannot be used in a large area of land because of the nature of the land. It will not give you accurate measurements because there's a presence of broken lines. So that is what we're able to do today. But before we go, I'd like to give us an assignment so that we'll practice what we have learned today. We have 3 questions. The first question is, 1, what is chain surveying? I take it again. What is chain surveying? 2, describe 6 chain surveying instruments and their functions. Describe 6 chain surveying instruments and their functions. Number 3, state the advantages and disadvantages of chain survey. State the advantages and disadvantages of chain survey. Now, for further studies, there are books available for us to read, but what will be commonly available to you will be the Essential Geography for Senior Secondary School by O.A. Iwena. You can check it for further reference. But if you have any questions or any comments, or you want to submit assignments to me, you can reach me on this number, 080-62-26-1602. I take the number again, 080-62-26-1602. I remain your geography teacher, Wizzy Jeremiah Akos. Thank you for listening. Remember, stay home, stay safe, keep on learning. Corona is real. Thank you. See you next time.